Today we'll be telling the story of the 12 Dancing Princesses by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Now, we all know the story is actually older than Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, but they're the ones who wrote it down, so bear with me. Once upon a time, there was a king who had 12 daughters, and they all were more beautiful than the one before them. He kept them all in together in the same large room, with their beds lined up in a row, and at night, after they had gone to the bed, the king, who, let's be said, had some trust issues, would lock them up and bolt the door. But when he opened the door in the morning, he would see that their shoes were all worn out from dancing, and no one could tell him how this happened. The king issued a proclamation. Whoever could find out where they were dancing at night could choose one of them to be his wife and succeed him as king. There's some toxic masculinity for you. But anyone who volunteered and could not find out after 3 days and nights was to forfeit his life, because, reasons. It wasn't long until another king's son offered to take the risk. He was received with all due hospitality, and at night he was taken to a room which opened onto the bedroom. Well, there's your first flaw. His bed was made there, and he was supposed to see where they went dancing. And in order to keep them from playing any secret tricks or going out by another way, the door to the bedroom was left open, but the eyes of the king's son suddenly felt like lead, and he fell asleep. That's unfortunate. When he woke up the next day, all 12 had been to the dance, and for there were their shoes with the soles worn right through. Oh my goodness. The second and third nights were pretty much the same, and so the king had his head cut off. Because, reasons. More's the pity. Many others followed him. Many others to undertake the dangerous enterprise. But they all got their heads cut off. Because, can't have that competence thing going. Now, it just so happened that a poor soldier who had been wounded and was no longer fit for active duty, go veterans, was on his way to the city where the king lived. On his way there, he met an old woman who asked him where he was going. "I'm not very sure myself," he says, and then he adds jokingly, "I'd really like to find out where the king's daughters wear their shoes at night. And then get to be a king." Well, the old woman says, "That's not so hard. You mustn't drink the wine they bring you before you go to bed, and you must pretend you're fast asleep." With that, she gave him a little cloak and said, "If you put this round your shoulders, you'll be invisible, and then you can steal after the 12 princesses." Having been so well advised, the soldier took the matter in good earnest. So he screwed up his courage and went before the king and volunteered to suit. That means, he wants to marry one of the princesses. He received the same hospitality as all the others and was given royal garments to wear. Now, at bedtime, he was led up to the anteroom, and when he got ready for bed, the eldest daughter brought him a goblet of wine. But he tied a sponge under his chin. I wonder how she didn't notice that. And let the wine run down into it so he didn't drink a drop. Then he lay down, and after laying there a little while, he started snoring as though he's fast asleep. The 12 princesses heard him and then laughed to themselves. "That one shouldn't have risked his life either," said the oldest, and then they got up, opened their wardrobes and chests and boxes and all the same, primped in front of the mirrors, frolicked around the room, and joyfully looked forward to the dance, except for the youngest. She said, "I don't know. You can feel gay if you like, but I have such a strange feeling. I'm sure something terrible is about to happen to all of us." "You're just a little goose," said the oldest. "You're always afraid. Have you forgotten how many kings' sons that have come here and fallen for the same trick? As for the soldier, I wouldn't have even given him the sleeping potion. Nothing would awaken that lout." When they were all ready, they first had a look at the soldier, but his eyes were closed and they didn't move a muscle, so they thought they were completely safe from him. The oldest one went to a bed and rapped on it. Immediately it sank into the floor, and they climbed through the opening one after the other with the oldest in the lead. Obviously, she's done this a few times. The soldier, who had watched everything, lost no time, put on his little cloak, and climbed down after the youngest. Halfway down the stairs, she stepped lightly on her gown. Ooh. She called out, "Is someone holding on to my gown?" "Don't be a simpleton," said the oldest. "You caught it on a nail." Then they went all the way down, and when they got to the bottom, they were standing in a magnificent avenue of trees, and all the leaves were silver. And they shimmered and shone. The soldier thought, "You'd better take along some token as proof," and he broke off a branch. But in doing so, the sound gave a prodigious crack. The youngest cried out again, "Something's the matter. Do you hear that cracking?" But the oldest said, "They're firing a victory salute, because soon we shall have redeemed our princes." The next they came on an avenue of trees of gold, and finally a third avenue where the leaves were of bright diamonds. Each time he broke a branch, and each time there was a cracking that made the youngest start an alarm. The oldest insisted they were victory salutes. They went on and came by a big river. 12 little boats were floating in the water, and in each boat sat a handsome prince. They had been waiting for the 12 princesses, and each one took one in his boat. The soldier, however, went and sat by the youngest. "I don't know what's wrong," said the prince. "The boat is much heavier tonight. I've got to row with all my strength to move it along." "It must be the hot weather," said the youngest. "I'm very warm myself." On the other side of the river stood a beautiful castle, which was brightly illuminated, and from which gay music of drums and trumpets all sounded. They rowed across and went inside, and each prince danced with his own sweetheart. The soldier danced along invisibly, and each time a princess took a goblet of wine in her hand, he drank it so that it was empty when she raised it to her lips. The youngest was, of course, frightened at this, but the oldest always managed to silence her, because you should always listen to your older siblings. They're so trustworthy. They danced until 3 o'clock the next morning, when all the shoes were worn out and they had to stop. The princes then rowed them back across the river, and this time the soldier sat up front with the eldest. On shore they said goodbye, and the princes promised to come again the next night, but when they reached the stairs, the soldier ran ahead and lay down in his bed. When the 12 came up wearily dragging their feet, he was already snoring again loud enough for them to hear. "Well, we won't have to worry about him," they said. They took off their beautiful clothes and put them away, and placed the worn-out shoes under the beds and laid down. The next morning the soldier didn't want to tell right away, because he wished to see a little more of these wonderful goings-on, and he went along for the second and the third night. Everything was just the same as the first time, and each night they danced until their shoes fell apart. The third time he took away a goblet for proof as well. When the hour had come for him to give his answer, he concealed 3 branches in the goblet on his person, and he went before the king. The 12 princesses were listening behind the door to see what he would say. When the king asked, "Where did my 12 daughters go out in their shoes dancing in the night?" he answered, "With 12 princes in an underground castle." And he told everything that had happened and produced all of his evidence. The king and his daughters were summoned, and he asked them if the soldier had told them the truth. And since they saw that the secret is out and lying would do no good, they had to confess everything. Well, there's your comeuppance for you. Next, the king asked the soldier which one he wanted to marry. "I am no longer a young man," he answered, "so let me wed the oldest." The wedding was celebrated the same day, and he was promised a kingdom after the king's death, but the enchantment of the princes was extended 1 day for each night they had dances with the princesses. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. But I'd like to think everybody lived happily ever after. After all, that's what fairy tales are all about, isn't it? I'll see you next time.